You're all set, Jason. If you want to, do you want to start, or do you want Nelson to start for you while you switch over?
Is Nelson there? Nelson, could
Yes,
you
yes.
start if possible?
Okay, sure.
Okay, man, for sure.
Nelson?
We have the prompt. Angel, I could go through it.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't wanna hold up anyone's time. Good evening, everyone. We're calling the meeting to order at 6:36 PM. Welcome. Today is the March 8th, 2023 meeting at the CB11's Land Use, Landmarks, and Planning Committee. My name is Jason Villanueva, and I am the chair of the committee. This meeting is being called to order, as stated previously, at 6:36 PM. And tonight we are joined by the district manager, Angel Muscane, the SADF liaison to our committee. In order to conduct an effective meeting, let's observe a few ground rules. No one may speak until granted the floor. CB11 members, if you have a question about board business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand through Zoom. If you click the participants icon, the participants panel should appear and you should find the raise hand function there. If you still have technical difficulty, you may click the chat icon and relate your difficulty to staff. Members should not engage in a back and forth discussion. The chair will recognize the next person to speak. The chat function should not be used for CB11 business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. The chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties you are having or to state in writing information like an email address that was already stated out loud on the record or during the meeting. When a member is given the floor to speak, I will identify you and you can unmute yourself so that you can speak. Please keep your questions and comments succinct and germane to the discussion. Members of the public, if you have a question or comment about the subjects on the agenda, please raise your hand through Zoom and wait to be recognized. We will now take the attendance by roll call.
Committee members, when I call your name, please answer present. Devin Crenshaw,
Present.
Kenneth Crouch,
Present.
Jessica Elliott,
Present.
Jessica Morris,
Present.
Nilsa Orama,
Present.
Beverly Pabon,
Present. Shalom.
hi, Vinny Torres,
Present.
Jason Villanueva,
Present.
and Candy Vivas Vasquez. You have quorum.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Angel. We'll now move on the agenda to adoption of the agenda. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and was posted online. If there is no objection, we will adopt the agenda as stated. Committee members, if you object to adopting the agenda, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. Next, we'll go through the approval of the meeting minutes. The minutes from our last meeting were distributed to committee members ahead of time by the board office. If there's no objection, we will adopt the minutes from that meeting. Committee members, if you object to adopting the minutes, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Seeing no objections, the minutes from the last committee meeting of February are adopted. They will soon be available on the CB11 website. So we will now move on to announcements. The next meeting of this committee is scheduled for April 12th, 2023. Anybody else have any announcements? Jessica Morris.
I think I'm tag teaming here with
my colleague Beverly Pavone. Beverly, do you want to be the voice here?
No, that's okay. You can do it. I'm still kind of fidgeting, trying to get things together on my computer.
Getting
Thank
settled.
you.
Okay. So
Yes.
the past couple of months, I think since January, Beverly and I had mentioned working to coordinate an opportunity for CB11 Land Use Landmarks and Planning Committee members and CB11 Housing Committee members to visit the Undesign the Red Line exhibit, which Nilsa, yes, is the same exhibit that was housed at a form of the same exhibit that was housed at the East Harlem Health Action Center that you had mentioned. We have identified a couple of dates in coming weeks where the folks at Barnard are willing to accommodate us with a later time to come and view the exhibit and a special tour for those who can attend. So I believe 6 p.m. on Wednesday, the 22nd of March, 2 weeks from tonight, and again the following Wednesday, the 29th of March, along with some open time on Saturday, the 25th, which is just general open to the community. So Beverly made a very informative and effective flyer that has this information along with a sign up. So we will circulate that to committee members in the next couple of days and through next week to coordinate. Hopefully all interested, curious, and otherwise committee members are will be able to join on either the 22nd or the 29th, though we recognize how limited and taxed our time is as volunteers. The hope is to have a discussion, an informed discussion about what the exhibit material means for our work together as board members and representatives of the East Harlem district. So thank you for your patience while we worked out the scheduling, which was in flux, but the 22nd and the 29th are on the calendar, 6 p.m. So thank you. Thanks, Jason, for the floor.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Beverly. I echo the same sentiments. I know I'm going to be attending one of these events, so I encourage all our committee members to as well attend it. And as soon as the meeting's over, we'll get the flyer out to our board members. Thank you again. Any other announcements? Excellent. Moving along. So, informational updates. We will have a Hope Hall Rehabilitation Project on January 24th, 2023. The Landmarks Preservation Commission voted to approve a proposal to install a barrier-free access lift. And after openings in area way railings at the individual landmark located at 177 East 104th Street. Thank you for the update. Is Hope Hall here to speak, or? I didn't see.
No, we were just sharing that as a point of information since the committee reviewed that application a couple of months ago.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Angel.
Sure
That was
thing.
something for us to now reach out to the developer and continue conversations. So I appreciate it. Pre-ULIP informational presentation, which we're now on our next stage, which is presentations and discussions. We will have Chris Carrillo from Ascendant Neighborhood Development. And before Chris starts, just again, this is a great opportunity for a lot of newer members and even some of us that have been here for a while. Is, as you know, we usually get these ULIPs the day of and the month of and need to vote on. So I'm really looking forward to building this type of relationship with a lot of other developers within our district to be able to present prior to the ULIP process, so that way they could get the community input. And I have to say, Ascendant has been a great partner in that effort of advocacy. So that being said, is Chris going to present, or is he going to have someone else?
Chris is here.
I'm
Oh,
here.
sorry. I'm
Hi.
sorry. With
That's
these,
okay.
these
It's
little
all right.
boxes. I'm like 50 people here, so sorry, 23, but yes.
Great, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to come and update you about one of our pipeline projects. So we're here this evening to give a pre-ULURP briefing about our Share NYC project, which is located at 244 East 106th Street. We were realizing earlier internally when we were prepping for tonight that it has been a little while since we presented this project the first time. But we're really excited that we are getting close to certification, which we are hopeful will happen either later this month or early next month. So we wanted to come back and refresh committee members' memories about what this project is. And for anyone who's new to the committee, since the last time we did a full presentation, just present it. So with that, we'll jump right in. Derek, next slide. So for anybody that doesn't know about Ascendant, we are a nonprofit organization based in East Harlem. We're celebrating our 35th anniversary this year. We work principally in the preservation and development of affordable housing. We have just under 700 apartments in our portfolio right now in 28 buildings in East and Central Harlem. We have another 600 or so new affordable rental apartments in our development pipeline in 4 projects, which we presented on briefly last month when we did an overview about our pipeline to the committee. And then we have another almost 1,600 apartments in our pipeline in 2 NYCHA packed projects that involve multiple NYCHA developments in East and Central Harlem. So this is probably too small for you to read on your screens, but we did send it to Angel and I'm sure he'll circulate it to all of you. But it just has details about the work that we do in the neighborhood. Next slide, Derek. And so for the Share NYC project, we are partnered with another nonprofit organization called the Ali Forney Center. Ali Forney is the largest nonprofit provider of services to LGBTQ youth in the country, and certainly in the city. They provide social services. They run a drop-in center for young people. They operate transitional housing, and they are increasingly getting involved in providing permanent supportive housing for the populations that they serve. And so we have been working with them for several years to develop the proposal for the project that we're presenting this evening. Next slide. Just a little bit more about Ali Forney. Unfortunately, we weren't able to have someone from Ali Forney attend this evening, but we will make sure that someone from Ali Forney is here when we're back during the ULURP process to answer any specific questions that the committee may have about their programs and services. Next slide. And next. So a little bit of the background about this project. So the site, 244 East 106th Street, is a vacant lot that Ascendant owns. It was sold to us as part of a cluster of 3 buildings that we acquired in the mid-1990s from HPD through an HPD rehabilitation program. Those 3 buildings with a total of 20 apartments were rehabilitated by Ascendant in the mid-90s and have been operated since then as affordable rental housing. One of those buildings is directly adjacent to this vacant lot, and 2 others are on adjacent blocks. And at the time, HPD owned this vacant lot, and because it was adjacent to the building they were selling to us, included it in the disposition. So it has never had any active use. It's been essentially a fenced off vacant lot, minimally maintained by us. It's not accessible to the residents of our adjacent building at 242 East 106th Street, nor is it accessible to the general public. So we started looking at this property as an opportunity for doing a new affordable residential development since we already owned it. And so that process started several years ago, and we looked, because it's a small property, it's 27 feet by 100 feet, we pretty quickly started looking at the supportive housing loan program through HPD as probably the best way to develop the site. it's not large enough to really support a significant number of larger sized apartments. So, we started initially looking at it under the sort of traditional model of supportive housing, and building with a number of studio apartments. And during those initial conversations, and while our architects were looking at the opportunities for developing the site, started conversations with Ali Forney Center specifically about supportive housing for young people with an LGBTQ focus. And while we were exploring that, HPD issued their Share NYC RFEI, Request for Expressions of Interest. And that came out in 2018. And it was an initiative under the de Blasio administration housing plan to solicit proposals for new models of shared housing. So HPD has been experimenting and doing pilot projects for a number of years, looking at this concept of sort of trying to recreate kind of new models of housing where some elements of apartments are shared. So rather than every single apartment having its own kitchen and bathroom, looking at models that might be sort of similar to traditional SRO housing, where residents might have their own living space, but share either bathrooms or kitchens or both. And so under this request for expressions of interest, HPD solicited proposals from development teams that controlled a site and wanted to propose that site as a place where a shared housing model could be developed with HPD support. So a number of development teams proposed. 3 projects were selected under that RFEI, including our proposed project on East 106th Street. So we were designated in the fall of 2019 and started work on further developing the plans and discussing with HPD how to move our project forward. Unsurprisingly, given the timing that you see there, the pandemic hit not too long after we were designated, which slowed down progress on the project. But happily, here to say we are finally getting close to certifying the ULURP for this, and are really excited to finally move the project forward. And Felipe is here from Felipe Cortez, the Acting Assistant Commissioner for Planning and Pre-Development. Is that right? From HPD. I don't know if Felipe wanted to say anything or if he's just here to listen to me talk, but but he can answer any of your HPD related questions. So next slide, Derek. We own this site, but because this lot was sold to us under an accelerated UDAP disposition by HPD, because it was essentially a disposition of existing buildings for rehabilitation, there was never an environmental review done of development on this site, nor were the disposition approvals that HPD secured at that time in the mid-1990s. They didn't contemplate new construction on this property. So even though we own the site, HPD needs to get new disposition approvals to allow us to proceed with this project. So the 2 ULURP actions that we're going to be seeking approval for through this process are acquisition and disposition of city-owned property. So essentially the way this works is this happens, pretty seamlessly and on paper only. But when we're ready to close on the project and start construction, at the closing, HPD will briefly reacquire the property from us and then sell it right back to us, but under the new disposition approvals that will be secured through this ULURP process. So it's somewhat technical, but there's no rezoning, there's no other ULURP actions that are required to facilitate this project. I should have mentioned earlier, this site was upzoned as part of the East Harlem rezoning process. It's within 100 feet of 2nd Avenue, so it was upzoned to an R9 district as part of that project, or as part of that initiative. So where we are in the process, we're getting close to certification. We're anticipating that either late this month or early next month. So that means we'll be back to this committee formally in the ULURP process, either at the April meeting or the May meeting. For our formal ULURP hearing and review, then moving on to the borough president later in the spring, the city planning commission probably over the summer, and to the city council sometime in the early fall. And with ULURP completed by the fall of this year, we'll finally be able to apply for our 9% low-income housing tax credits. And assuming we can secure them, it's a competitive funding process through HPD. We would be in position then to start construction on the project sometime next year. Next slide. So a little more information about the site. So this is an aerial view. 2nd Avenue is kind of cutting through on the right side. 106th Street is toward the top of the slide, and 105th Street is the bottom. So we are just west of 2nd Avenue on the south side of 106th Street, facing Franklin Plaza. Next slide, please. Just a couple of other views. So highlighted in orange is the site in kind of the surrounding context. The building immediately to the west, the 5-story red brick building with the cream colored cornice, is the other building that we own that's directly adjacent. That's a 7-unit apartment building that we rehabilitated. Next slide, Derek. So, really quickly, part of the analysis that we did when we were first thinking about applying to the Share NYC RFEI, and we've shared this slide before when we first presented the project, but I think it helps us kind of illustrate why we wanted to look at this site and this building as a Share NYC shared housing concept. So on the far left is kind of the unit layout that we would get if we did traditional HPD studios under the supportive housing loan program. Everyone would have its own kitchen and bathroom. There'd be kind of a lot of wasted space in the middle of the building for the corridor and the stairs and elevators. In the middle of your slide, we looked at micro units as a concept, which is another thing that HPD has explored through pilot projects in the past. We could get a few extra units, but again, the amount of space that's taken up by multiple duplicative kitchens, that space that's kind of lost in the middle by the extra wide corridor, it's really not the most efficient layout for this site. So on the right is kind of where we ended up. And this shows kind of the basic layout of our shared housing units. So essentially what we're proposing is a 10-story building. The ground floor, and we'll go through this in a little more detail, but the ground floor has the lobby and main entrance, some mechanical spaces and a community room, amenity space for residents. The second floor will have offices for the Ali Forney Center staff who'll be working on site, and a building manager's apartment. And then floors 3 through 10 will be divided up into 4 duplex units. And within each of those duplexes, there are 8 rooming units. So these are specific kind of terminology for shared housing units, but essentially every resident in those, what are a total of 32 rooming units, will have their own individual rooming unit. They'll have a lease for that unit, but essentially they'll share common areas within that duplex space. So they'll have a shared living area, a shared large kitchen space, and 4 shared bathrooms to be shared among the 8 residents of that duplex unit. There's also workstations where people can do work on the computers, etc. So basically, that's kind of how it lays out, and we've got a bunch more slides to show this in a little bit more detail. But just so that you can see how the efficiency of this layout makes much better use of the space that we have on this very narrow site. Next slide. This kind of shows it divided up a little bit, so you can see, and the kind of the way the pattern of the windows on the west side of the building gives you a sense of where the duplexes are. So one update since we last presented this project many months ago, there is a requirement for buildings that are considered, that fall under this category of shared housing. There's a requirement in the multiple dwelling law and the housing maintenance code for a live-in building manager. It's a very specific requirement dating back many decades. And so one of the changes that we had to make when we first presented the project, we had an additional 4 rooming units on the second floor for a total of 36 in the building. And when we realized in our discussions with HPD that we needed to accommodate an apartment for a building manager, we took part of the second floor for that. And then we took the rest of the second floor for the Ali Forney office space, which had initially been on the ground floor, but as we further looked at the resiliency design requirements and moving our mechanical equipment up out of the flood zone, because like we're in East Harlem, so almost everything's in a flood zone. We had to move mechanical equipment up out of the basement. It moved to the first floor. The offices that were on the first floor moved up to the second floor. So we now have 32 rooming units in the building and 1 building manager's unit. So one change since the last time we fully presented this project to the committee. Next slide. And this just shows a section of the building, kind of looking from the side at the different floors. And, you know, we have a high groundwater table and the flood zone. So we've been really working with the architects and our engineers to make sure that we're designing the building to be resistant to any future flooding, make sure that mechanical systems are in places there, they will be safe, and the building can continue to operate even in the case of a flooding event. Next slide. And this just, you know, again, on your screen, it'll be a little difficult to see these, but when you have the full slide deck shared with you, you can look at the details. But basically, these are the current floor plans for the building, all the way from the cellar to the ground floor, which has the lobby, as I mentioned. At the rear of the building is the amenity space. Because the backyard of our adjacent building at 242 is not accessible to residents of that building, it's never been accessible to them, and because of the way the building's designed, there's really not a way to make it accessible. What we are doing is we're going to be granting an easement from that building to the new building so that the residents of the new building at 244 will have access to a portion of that rear yard. So they'll have their own landscaped backyard space off of the amenity room. Next slide. And this is just a more updated version of what the floor plan looks like these days. We've made a lot of tweaks and changes as we have further refined the plans and moved the project forward over these last couple of years. Next slide. And then we have a series of renderings just to give you a sense of the space. This is the proposed lobby for the building. So there will be security 24/7 and controlled access to the building. Ali Forney staff operate at their housing facilities 24/7 as well. So there will always be someone on site there to serve residents of the building. Next slide. Just another view of the lobby space and the main reception area. Oh, next slide. This is just one view of how the rear community room can be set up. Obviously, it'll be there for residents to access. We haven't decided exactly how it's going to be furnished, but it'll be a multi-purpose space for resident use, for quiet gathering, lectures, classes, that type of thing. So it can be configured in multiple different ways for however Ali Forney wants to program it for the residents. Next slide. This is just a view of the second floor, the Ali Forney office space. Next. And then some renderings that show kind of the interiors, how we're planning out the duplex units. So this is looking into one of the duplex apartments with the living space on the ground floor and a connecting staircase up to the upper floor. All of the floors in the building will have elevator access. So the connecting stairs are just a convenience within the duplex spaces, but the whole building will be fully ADA accessible. Residents will have access to all floors of the building. Next slide. It's just a view looking from the shared kitchen out toward the living space. Next. The upper floor of the duplex with workstations and areas where the residents can do work in a more kind of social environment. Next. Shared kitchen space. Next. Another view. Next. And then a view of one of the individual rooming units. So, you know, we're looking at different options for how to furnish the spaces, how to create a lot of storage for residents. And we've been talking with Ali Forney about their storage needs and how they provide in their current housing space for residents who live in shared housing spaces currently. Next slide. And this is a view of the rear yard space. Next. And one of the things that we've been incorporating into all of our Ascendant projects is public art. And so this is a view of the site as it exists today, and to improve the aesthetics of it until we can actually build a new building. We worked with a nonprofit organization called Groundswell that works with young people and artists to develop public art projects. So this is a temporary art installation on the fence at the site that was co-created by an artist and existing Ali Forney clients who provided the content and the ideas and the imagery that the artist then took to create this artwork on the side of the space. Next slide. And that is the end of our presentation. So happy to answer any questions that you have about the ULURP actions or the project.
Thank you, Chris. Excellent presentation as always. Does any committee members have questions first? Beverly.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chris, for the presentation. I do remember you coming to the board in the past on this project. Questions that I have is, one, I know that the City Council just passed a new law called the Racial Impact Report, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. Would y'all have to put that in as part of your ULURP application? It's called local law, I think law 1572B. My next couple of questions is regarding the apartments. You said now you have to have for the manager, so y'all have a unit for the manager and a unit for the super, so that's two type of things that y'all would have to have. And in regards to the backyard, 242 doesn't have access, and you're gonna have access from the new building to the backyard. Would the people from 242 still be able, since you expanded it, will they be able to use that backyard? And my last question is, these resident units are only for single people, correct? And that's it. Thank you. I know it's a lot, but I can.
That's okay.
I wrote them down so I can remember.
Okay, I wasn't, but I think I'm going to go backwards. Yeah, so they're individual rooming units. So each rooming unit would be for one single individual.
Okay.
So that was one. The going backwards, the backyard. Right. So again, because of the configuration of 242, there is no access from that building to the backyard. So it's just going to be accessible to the residents of the new building. It's, it has never been accessible, nor has this lot where we're proposing the new building. And so, to try to make some use of that rear yard space and give some outdoor space to the residents of this building, we felt like that was, it was a good way to reuse space that otherwise couldn't be used, because the way the units are configured at 242, there's no public access out to the backyard. So that's that. The going backwards, what was the other?
The building manager and
the building manager. Yes. So
yeah.
We did not. That's a mistake on our slide deck. The terminology should be building manager. There isn't a super because it's this specific quirk of the multiple dwelling law and the housing maintenance code that buildings like this with shared housing units need to have a building manager, and it's kind of like spelled out there like what that person does. So there is one apartment that's a one-bedroom apartment. It's on the second floor at the rear of the building, on the share space on the same floor with the Ali Forney offices. That is the building manager's apartment. There isn't a separate super's apartment. So it's 32 rooming units and one building manager's apartment.
And the building manager doesn't share the space with anybody else. That would be his whole apartment.
Yes, yes. his or her
Okay.
apartment, yes.
Okay,
And
my last,
the
Rachel,
first
okay.
question, I'm gonna ask Felipe about that question because I actually don't know the answer.
Yeah,
okay,
I think, Beverly, you were referring to what is called the racial equity report. Am I right?
yes, that's
Yeah.
correct.
So the projects that triggered that report have to fulfill a series of requirements. This project in particular does not fulfill all the requirements that triggered that. For instance, this project is going to be approximately a little bit less than 20,000 square feet in total. And one of the requirements of the racial equity report is that projects that will need to be conveyed or disposed by the city to developers need to be at least 50,000 square feet, which in this case, this project is not. So
Okay,
that's why that report is not triggered for this project. But you will see that report in other projects that we will be bringing to CB11 very soon. Among them, I believe Chris presented to you guys a few days ago, the beacon, and that project will definitely trigger that report. So you will see that report in other projects, and that will be part of the applications.
okay, and that will be just for new developments, or would there be existing developments that's being rehabilitated?
My understanding, I can get back to you on that, but I believe
Okay.
it's mostly for new developments. But I can look into that question and send an answer to Angel in the next couple of days.
Thank you so very much. I appreciate it.
No problem, Beverly.
Thanks, Beverly.
Thank you all. Great discussion. Any other questions from committee members? Vinnie Torres.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Chair. So, Chris, thank you for that presentation. And I can appreciate the change in the design, looking at these duplex units here from what's been demonstrated. Seems like a unique design that really looks interesting and welcoming. So thank you for that design. Many other developers, I don't think would have incorporated such a design to kind of maximize more units. So congratulations for that. As the unit of action, this is requiring disposition and conveyance. I'd just like to ask some questions on the construction side of this development. Is it going to yield, local hiring opportunities? What are the plans on that? Have you guys have enacted such on some of the other projects? Also, is there MWBE goal or requirements that's going to be set forth to kind of grant opportunities for this project as it relates to the construction part?
So I actually have to ask Felipe about that one too, in terms of the specific HPD requirements that will come along with it. I mean, obviously, we're always committed to working with contractors who are committed to local hiring. We have not selected a contractor for this project yet, unlike some of the other projects that we have presented that were the result of RFPs, where we, had a contractor on board. We have not made a final determination yet about who the contractor is going to be. We've been having conversations with a couple of different groups. Because of the small size and somewhat complicated nature of doing this project on this site with the flood requirements and other things, and it's a tall, narrow building. There are fewer contractors, but we have been having conversations with a number of them, and obviously, we have come and presented a number of projects before. We know the community board's concerns about these issues, and we'll be happy to come back with more details about that as we have them. But we're absolutely committed to all of that.
Thank you. And if I can, Chair, just piggyback one more question on that regarding scale. So different projects yield different rates and wages for construction workers. Chris, I'm sure you're aware of that. Is this project being publicly financed in any way? I know you've mentioned tax incentives, and if so, what are the wage requirements? Is it a project that's going to yield prevailing wage for workers, or is it pretty much a non-prevailing wage type of setup?
Oh, Felipe, did you want to? Were you?
No, Vinny, I just wanted to answer the first question and maybe give an initial answer to the second question that you just raised. For the first question, every project that is receiving city subsidy will need to fulfill the MWB requirements. So this project will not be an exception in that. And I believe related to the recent question, I believe, Chris, if you can confirm, but this project does not trigger prevailing wage. So it's not subject to any.
No, because of the funding. So I should have mentioned the funding sources, in addition to applying for an allocation of, which is a competitive process, 9% low-income housing tax credits. The main funding source will be city subsidy through the city's supportive housing loan program. So unlike, for instance, the Carmen Villegas apartments project that we presented to the committee a few months ago in late 2022, which is under HPD's SARA program, Senior Affordable Rental. That one comes with specific prevailing wage requirements because of the funding sources that HPD uses to finance new senior housing. This project under supportive housing loan program does not trigger those same prevailing wage requirements.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Another great discussion. Thank you all. I don't see another committee members. Warren James.
Hello, good evening. I want to congratulate Ascendant hiring the best possible architects who have designed the most beautiful building in the block. I think it is extremely attractive and the double height is very innovative. So kudos to the architects. Congratulations to the organization for hiring a great team. And I'm looking forward to seeing the building on the block. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the feedback. We're really excited about this project. I should have mentioned by name, their name is on the presentation, but by name, the firm that we've been working with this for this site for many years, predating the RFEI, which came out in 2018. So we're, I guess, 5 or 6 years into this now, is Think Architecture. So they have done a really amazing job, initially looking at the site, working with the Ali Forney Center, and then when the RFEI came out, really developing a number of concepts for us to review and specifically for Ali Forney to review to try to come up with, the clients that Ali Forney serves are young people who have, experienced homelessness and housing instability, who have often been kicked out of their homes because of the sexual orientation or gender identity. And so, the goal was really to try to create a very home-like environment. Shared housing, supportive housing, SROs, can often feel institutional and isolating. And I think really hit it out of the park with this design of the duplexes, trying to create warm home-like environments, shared kitchens where people could share meals together, private space where they can go to be alone and have their own space that's just theirs, that's unique to them. But, really opportunities to have a home-like environment as they transition into adulthood, get the services that they need to establish themselves, and then hopefully move on to their own private apartments and make space available for, for other folks to come in who need it. So thank you for the feedback. Really appreciate it.
It's spectacular. And I think that what you just described is not mutually exclusive with great design, innovative design, modern architecture. And, instead of copy pasting everything that's around, this is charting a new direction. And I just want to encourage that because East Harlem deserves excellence in design. And this is showing that. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you all. Seeing no more hands raised, I'm just gonna make a request, Chris, and we'll work on this before your look. Maybe we could do a field visit to one of these existing spaces just to familiarize the committee with it. As always, I tend to believe seeing helps a lot more. And we've been doing some of those efforts since board members have been more present since remote. So as always,
Great.
thank you for your presentation. Thank you,
Thanks a lot.
HPD, for sticking around. I would ask if you could continue to stick around It'll help us on some of these other items. And that being said, we'll move the agenda along. Thank you for your time, Chris.
Thanks a lot, Jason. Thank you all.
Jason, happy to stay a little bit longer, though. I have some
Understood.
daddy duties tonight, but yeah, I
I
can stick
get
around
it.
for a little bit.
And even if we just to, again, it's probably more for some concerns relative to other projects, but it maybe it shows to the committee that HBD is here, it's present, and it may allow other opportunities for us to further discuss some other concerns that aren't necessarily project specific, but are
Absolutely.
district-wide concerns. So thank you, Philippe, and appreciate you sticking around for us.
No problem.
So we're going to continue moving on along. This is just an informational update. I think I made a mistake on one of the pieces of paper. It was saying we were going to have to take a position on this item, but the long and the short of it, it's an informational presentation done by the New York Public Library's application, which I've been told has already been approved, but I'll let them share it to us. The update on the application to Landmarks Preservation Commission related to the renovation of the Aguilar Library branch. I believe, Anne, I think
Yes.
I thought, I'm sorry, Anne, I had a Francis.
Yeah. So I'm here. I just gonna introduce the team, and our architects are going to share their screen with the presentation. Great. Okay. Can everybody see this?
Yes.
Yes,
And you can all hear me.
yes, Anne.
Okay, awesome. Yes, so what we're doing tonight is sharing with you the significant portion of our landmarks package that has been approved, and there was a decision made not to go to a full hearing, but we wanted to bring you up to date. We have shared the overall project with you about a month ago. I think it was February 15th. So what you're about to see is a presentation that summarizes what the project is for those members who might not have been present at the February meeting, and then to give you a snapshot of our landmarks issue and how we've dealt with it. Next slide, please. So the background on this project is that the New York Public Library has been working for several years through the Capital Planning and Construction Department, of which I'm a member, and Logan Verkamp, who's also present, is the project manager. And of course, a larger team. We've been working for several years on the design of the Aguilar Library. And our architects for the project are Carl Gruswitz, who's been involved for many years with us as the project manager, and Carol Lowenson, the partner in charge from Mitchell Jurgel Architects. We have loved working with them, and they have worked with us on a number of Carnegie libraries within the New York Public Library portfolio. Next, please. Okay, so it's in summary, we're not going to show a lot of pictures. I just wanted to highlight what we're doing in the building. The Aguilar Library, for those who don't know, weren't around, is a very old building. It was first part of it was built in the late 19th century, like 1899, I believe. And then it was added to in 1905 or so. I may have this a little off, but it's old. So we had thought initially that we would be just improving the first floor based on the funding that we had and our desire to improve it in a whole bunch of ways. And the project became bigger, but we're committed to doing all the things that we learned needed to be done. So a big issue is the ADA access for the building generally, and also that we never had any bathroom, but certainly not an ADA compliant bathroom on the first floor. So it's going to be a big improvement. There were quite a number of challenges with the pathways out of the building for egress during emergencies and fires. So we had to really look at that and make improvements. And there was just building infrastructure needs that needed to be addressed, including new boiler, the elevator, lots of needs around the existing electrical and sprinkler systems, and the information technology systems, which obviously support our electronic information, our computers, needed to be improved. So those are the sort of big picture buckets, I would guess you could say, of work being scheduled now for the building. Next slide, please. So where we are is that we are in the middle of bidding for this project and anticipate closing the branch in May with a construction start in June of 2023. And we are expecting that will be done the fall of 2024 with a reopening late in calendar year 2024. Next, please. I'm going to turn this over in a minute, but this is the first of a series of slides that Carl and Carol will be sharing with you that relate to our landmark submission and our landmarks issues. So the building is a New York City individual landmark, but in the report, the main historic features that are highlighted are the facade. However, as I said earlier, we are doing some changes to egress, which are required landmarks to look at what kind of impact we would have on the roof. So the mock-up has been completed, and you begin to see here in the slide how we laid out some fencing to give a sense of it, and the decision was made that this could be handled at the staff level of LPC, so we're in the middle of that process. So I'm going to now let Carl and Carol talk about the details that relate to the landmarks impact and what we're actually planning to do on the roof.
Thank you, Anne.
Sure.
I'm Carl Gresswitz from Mitchell Jurgala. This is basically the presentation we present to LPC, and this is for context. This is 110th Street. The main facade, that's the historic facade, faces 110th Street on this front. This project does not impact anything regarding the front of the building. For context, of just the plan is a little bit rotated here. 110th Street is to the right. The entire lot is a individual landmark, and this is the third floor plan, and we're trying to improve the existing egress, second means of egress out of the community room on the third floor. We're currently on the left side plan here. You have to cross the roof outside and then go down a fire escape in the back of the building and down to the basement. And what we are proposing to do is have a enclosed corridor, so it's climate controlled, and we are also improving the south stair as well, and so creating a more direct connection for the public. And basically, because of that, this particular wall, which you'll see in several other slides, is the one that is viewed a little bit from the northwest side of the building and not visible from other portions of around the block. But I'll show you that to you in the next slides. So in the left image here, the section, This is where the third floor community room is. You walk out to the roof, again, descend down the fire escape. And on the right is the proposed corridor connecting to that back area, and then down the stairs to the building enclosed. The next are the elevations from the west. This is an existing stucco wall of the existing facade along the west facade here. This is a chain link and barbed wire fence for security reasons on the left side. And then our corridor is a stucco enclosure to match the existing, and we're going to match the exact same color, so it will not be so visible. And then this LPC requests that we provide sections at different angles, one a straight on view from the street, in which case the addition is not visible from eye level across the street on 110th Street. This is an oblique view. In this particular location from the northwest, the addition is not visible. But we also have, you can see on the upper left is the photo of the existing, roughly in this corner, this is where the addition would be. And we also did, as Ann mentioned, a mock-up showing the surface of that area of the addition up on the roof in orange netting. And then the remaining images here are renderings of what it would look like. And so this is probably the easiest one to take a look at here. Again, matching the existing stucco facade and coplanar with it right along the party wall. And then just different views of different perspectives. Then from other vantage points along the around the northwest, as keyed on this key plan in the corner, you could see a little bit of the netting here from certain views. I would say this view here over by the subway, enlarged view from the shot D, but and sorry, one in B as well. But the other perspectives, it's not visible. And then lastly, this is the image from the kind of southwest. I'm sorry, I'm probably not seeing the full screen there. From around the block on the south, on the southeast and the east, none of the mock-up is visible. And that's that.
Thank you, Carl. So we're here to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Thank you for your presentation. Jessica Morris, Beverly, and
Thank you, Jason. You can hear me? Yes. Okay. Thanks very much for the presentation. I know some of the requirements for landmarks, you have to show how much you're not impacting things. And I think you've done that very effectively. Furthermore, I think the library, Carnegie libraries generally are very special places, and this will continue to stand, I hope, for a very long time as one of those very little special places, and making it such inside through its commitment to use and providing a point of service in the improvements that you're making is a wonderful thing. It's just the right scale for a neighborhood here. And I just want to acknowledge that the neighbor at 170 East 110th Street, the large footprint of the supermarket with Elevate Transit zoning text change, I'm sure that is, seriously underbuilt in a way that we won't see that extension should, 20 years from now, there be a large building right next door. So I think you've proved very effectively that there's not much impact whatsoever. And thank you for the good work. I look forward to continuing to support the library in all of its needs. So please come back and ask for things if there's a way we can help as a board support your great work. Thank you.
Great.
No
Thank
question.
you. Thank you very much.
excellent commentary, Jessica. Beverly.
Yes, I'm sorry. I wanted to go back to well, my question is regarding the egresses. You're gonna have new elevators and staircases to the back? Is that what she was showing?
Not exactly. So there's an existing elevator that's remaining, but we're making some improvements to it. So that's that. And then the stairs that exist in this building are being retained and modified so they can support the need for two means of egress out of the building. They're not the best. They're not configured properly, really, for today's standards. So they're being reconfigured, but we're not introducing any completely new stairs. Well, we are introducing is this new corridor connection on the roof.
Okay, my last question is with the coming of the Second Avenue subway, would there be any hindering with you going forward with these plans?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Could you speak a little louder?
I was saying in regards to the Second Avenue subway coming, I want to know, would this be hindering in any way your plans to make these alterations?
I'm not aware of any impacts. Were you contemplating would be an impact?
I believe 100, if I'm not mistaken, wouldn't 110th Street is part of the Second Avenue subway stations, or maybe it's not.
And I can chime in there.
Okay.
Yeah, there is no known impacts, and that has not been discussed at all. MTA has not reached out to us in regards to this branch, which means the assumption, yeah, there are no impacts, and we're not planning for that.
All right, thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
Great discussion, excellent presentation. Thank you to the team at the New York Public Library for providing an update. You probably covered it and I apologize. The one question, do you guys have an anticipated construction start or?
Yeah. So we're planning to start in June of this year, pretty soon.
Excellent. All right, so we'll see you, I guess, for a follow-up. Prior to me closing, let me just go to Warren James.
Hello, congratulations to Mitchell Jurgala. Welcome to East Harlem. And to the library, thank you for keeping an eye on this beautiful building. What I think was Jessica who brought up the issue that the supermarket is a single-story taxpayer building, and that's sooner rather than later will go, and the existing zoning will make that building anywhere from 6 to 10 stories, mirroring the building that's across the street. So I would not be concerned, or perhaps that could be further emphasized to landmarks, that what will be visible will become invisible because of the soft site adjacent to it. And the other issue I want to bring up for New York Public Libraries to consider as soon as possible, the lower portion of the facade facing the street has deteriorated over the years. It has stone that has, it's very soft stone. And so before much more time goes by, can the library begin the process to ask for capital dollars to repair and re-establish the lower portion of the pieces that stick out into the sidewalk? That entire lower portion, let's say the first 10, 15 feet of the facade facing the sidewalk, has deteriorated substantially.
Yeah.
And before too much time goes by, I'd like to propose that that issue, or that line item, be put into the hopper as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And would you like me to?
No, well, I'll start. So there is, this is one I wanna talk about. So there is a project to address this, which has been on the books at the New York City Department of Design and Construction for years. It's ready to go in terms of its design, but we have no schedule for it. So it is primarily an ADA access project, which means that the entire horrible looking ramp would be replaced, and there's some improvements to the facade. But I'll let Logan say anything more that he wants to say about that.
Yeah, no, you basically covered it. I was going to say that it is specifically being addressed. Unfortunately, per Ann, it is a bit out of our control because it is a DDC project. We are hoping, we are pushing hard that it can actually happen in tandem or as this one is wrapping up. But we don't have full control over that. It's what we are told that will be happening. And the scope of that work, just as an FYI, is from the front windows down. So addressing all of that soft stone as well as the ramp and kind of restoring that area, just as you noted. So
Thank you.
Already in process.
Well, it sounds like what's needed is a letter and a letter signature campaign to DDC to get this off the ground.
Yes.
I
moving.
absolutely, I
So-
mean, we have tried.
I'll jump
No,
in
you-
at that stage. Thank you all. Excellent,
Thank you.
excellent discussion. And Warren, thank you for the notice. I need not say we're in budget season.
Yeah.
The community
High
board
priority.
just responded to the statement of district needs as required for our district. So we have every intention on the continuing to advocate for resources that need to be funded, let alone being advised from our community-based and administrative agencies such as New York Public Library, letting me know now that there's allocated funding that doesn't seem to be getting spent. So I will
Thank you.
definitely, as chair of this committee, bring it up at the executive level and start having discussions, board wide about, for lack of a better word, notifying DDC that we're interested in them fulfilling the commitments
Thank
made
you.
to our residents, right? Because at the end of the day, we use the library, we walk by the library, and for some
Thank
it's
you.
about work, and for others it's about ensuring a good quality of life. So I am going to
Thank
take
you.
this to committee, and I look forward to continuing this conversation. I know this is the first time we meet virtually, but if anybody could tell you, when I start banging my drum, I'm going to start banging, and
Yeah,
I'm a father, so libraries to me are great. So all that said and done, we'll definitely, from a board perspective, I'll bring it up to our chair and to other chairs, because I know economic development is constantly advocating for the libraries in our district, and being told to, information is key. So I appreciate it, and we'll look forward to advocating for you all as much as you advocate for us. So,
yeah,
We'll
we
get
would,
you.
we
We'll
would
get you
welcome that.
letters.
Yeah.
Yeah, we would write letters of support from White's community support, write letters to the DDC commissioner to get on the horn and get this fixed. Thank you.
excellent. And yeah, Tom Foley is very well, for lack of a better word, accessible as the new commissioner. So I think it's something that could be said. And I know DDC has been really engaged on projects that kind of just got shipped because of the pandemic. But I will not speak for them. I'm just familiar with them. So we will hold them accountable as required, right? That's what we
Yeah,
do. We
anything you
advocate for our constituents.
anything you could do would be most welcome.
And the constituents include CBOs. So we also advocate for the CBOs. So we'll definitely work with the library. Thank you, Ann, Logan, and to Mitchell and Gerga for your excellent presentation and update. If there are no further questions, which I don't see, we'll move the agenda along.
Thank you.
Thank you all. So the next presentation is a request for a letter of support. John Sanchez, Executive Director from the 5-Borough Housing Movement. Is the presenter here?
Yes, good evening. This is John Sanchez.
Excellent. Thank you, John. You have the floor.
Yes, I just need sharing privileges. I have a short presentation I want to share with the board members. All right, well, good evening, board members. Thank you for the opportunity to present. My name is John Sanchez. I'm the Executive Director of 5-Borough Housing Movement. but I also was a district manager for Bronx Community Board 6 for 5 years. So I appreciate all of the work that you do daily for your communities, especially on late nights like this. So now I'll get into the presentation. The 5-borough housing movement, we're really advocating for office to residential conversions to allow some affordable housing to be built. This effort came out of the governor and the mayor reevaluating how can business districts be vibrant neighborhoods, realizing that people don't go into the office 5 days a week. Looking at what changes need to be made on the state and city level. The city itself, the Department of City Planning, released a study on office conversions in January, looking at how feasible it was to have conversions, what are some changes that need to be made on the state and city level. And our effort is to amplify that to see some of these initiatives passed. To give some background, the Manhattan office market has changed. Vacancies are at its highest level ever, even post-pandemic. And this is more pronounced when it comes to Class B and Class C spaces. These are the older type buildings without all of the amenities. And then we all understand that there's a housing crisis. Every level of government is talking about it. We realize that cities in the South are doing more than we are. 200,000 Black New Yorkers left the city in the past 2 decades, and they're leaving to cities in the South, whether it be Atlanta, Houston, Dallas, places that have a lower cost of living and they're building more housing. And we're also seeing that where housing is being built and approved, it's not equal. 10 community boards account for nearly half of the new housing that's been built in the city. If we wanted a effective housing policy, this pie chart would list every community board rather than just relying on 10. This is even more pronounced when it comes to affordable housing. I'm from the Central Bronx, where the Deep Red, where thousands of affordable units were built. But there are other neighborhoods in the city, especially south of 96th Street, that haven't been keeping up with the same pace of affordable housing creation. So what we're advocating for is we want to change some of the state laws that prevent housing from being built. We want to see flexibility for offices to be able to convert if they choose, allow for the city to determine where a higher FAR cap is suitable. And if there's going to be office conversions, we want to make sure that there's permanently affordable units as a part of these conversions. Right now, the state law is very confusing, and I'll try to explain it to you all. Right now, buildings built before 1961, they have the flexibility to convert. If buildings are built between 1961 and 1977, they can only convert if they're in Manhattan, south of Murray Street. And buildings built after 1977 can't convert to residential, even if they're empty right now. What we're proposing and what the city is proposing to the state is that there be a uniform threshold. If the building's built before 1990, it has the option to convert. Not a mandate, but just having the option to convert empty space into apartments. In terms of the type of offices that would convert, it varies. There's the smaller type of office buildings. These are more seen in Tribeca or Soho. They have working windows. They're the easiest to convert. Type 2 and type 3, these are the type of office buildings you're more likely to see in Midtown, near Grand Central or Times Square. They're more difficult to convert, but they yield more units. And we think a combination of all 3 types would have the option if the state allows it. Here are 2 more visual examples. These 2 buildings have converted already. The first example, this is on 26th and 5th Avenue. This is a type 1 building. It's easy to convert, kind of looks like an apartment already. A type 3 building is 180 Water Street. This looks like an office building, even though it's already been converted. It requires a lot more work from the owner. It's a longer process. We think most of the conversions will look like this, but some of them will look like 180 Water Street. The other thing is a 12 FAR cap. So the 12 FAR cap is a state law from 1961, which limits New York City from having more apartments per floor in a building. This mostly impacts Manhattan south of 96th Street, bits and pieces of Long Island City and downtown Brooklyn. And it's important to know that several Mitchell-Lama buildings across the city couldn't be built today because of this FAR cap. This is just a visual showing that the FAR cap doesn't mean that there's a height cap. It shows you that buildings can have differing heights, but have the same FAR. These are examples, these three buildings are examples of buildings that could not be built today because they exceed the cap. I'll start with my neighborhood in the Bronx, 1749 Grand Concourse. This building exceeds the state FAR cap. It couldn't be built today, no matter what. The building on the right, West 75th Street, it's not that tall of a building. This used to be an all SRO building. Now it has rentals. And it's important to know that a lot of the buildings that were grandfathered in before the cap was implemented, more than half of them are less than 20 stories. So even if the state lifts the cap, the city will still determine where it makes sense. It would go through the ULURP process, community board process, et cetera. It just allows the city to make that decision rather than Albany. In terms of how many units we think could be created through conversions, we have a good guide. The state and the city did this already with the 421G program, which was exclusively for Lower Manhattan. It produced around 13,000 units. The big difference is that this had no affordability. We want to see a new program that has a tax incentive for affordability as a part of the conversions. And we think 20,000 units could be created over the course of a decade. Again, just comparing the two programs, the program we're proposing would have about 20,000 units. It would be permanent affordability even when the incentive expires. The affordable units can't be converted to condos or co-ops. And the entire city would be eligible. Even though most of the conversions would be in Manhattan, there are pockets in the South Bronx, downtown Flushing, Jamaica, Queens that have expressed interest. And another important thing is that the governor's budget proposal actually mandates and says, for the affordable units, 50% of the affordable units have to be 2 bedrooms or more. And no more than 25% of the units can be 1 bedrooms or smaller. Again, this is just a short map showing where most of the conversions would happen. And again, it's mostly Manhattan south of 96th Street, but even more specifically, south of 59th Street. These are other benefits we think conversions could bring. We understand people aren't taking the train as much as they used to. If more people are living in these commercial areas, that'll help boost transit ridership. Also, if there's more eyes on the street, that helps with public safety, more business for the local businesses and restaurants. And of course, people from across the 5 boroughs can work on these construction projects. This is the last slide, just highlighting some of our community partners. You know, we have letters of support from 6 Bronx community boards, a Queens community board, groups like the Grand Central Partnership, NAACP, groups from across sectors that want to see affordable housing created through office conversions, realizing that it's not going to solve the problem, but it can make a dent in it. And it's one of the tools in the toolbox. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions from the board. Thank you.
Excellent presentation. Thank you, John. Is there any questions from the members of the committee? Jessica Elliott.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. Just curious what the impact would be if you are aware in East Harlem. I know we don't have a ton of office space to convert, but if you have any insight on what this could bring for our neighborhood. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say little to no office conversions would be in East Harlem. But the reason why I'm presenting to your board and other boards is because if Manhattan south of 96th Street does its part of producing housing, that eases the housing pressure in other parts of the borough. As a former district manager, we supported all the affordable housing projects that came our way, but people were still feeling the housing crunch because when people are priced out of Manhattan, they go further uptown, they go to the Bronx, they go to Brooklyn, and I showed the map of who was building affordable housing and who wasn't. The wealthiest neighborhoods in this city shouldn't be excluded from providing affordable housing, especially when neighborhoods like mine in the Bronx have been doing their share for decades.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Jessica. Morris.
Sorry. Thank you very much. I appreciate you being here and forming an organization to advocate for some of this much needed consideration. I think it's happening at so many levels. I think I have one question, and I think it's not necessarily for you, Mr. Sanchez per se, but to the board with regard to whether it's our job to opine on this sort of proposal. Being that it's not fixed as far as what you're proposing. There isn't a clear policy statement or objective that is, I feel like, not necessarily in flux. And I just want to point to the, and I appreciate the materials that you shared, the executive budget summary, and call out a couple of things that this is a once in a generation opportunity to redefine how a city orients itself relative to its central business district, which is perhaps necessary. I take some issue with the statement that the benefit expires in 20 years, the tax benefit as a part of this concern. I think if we're pushing for affordable housing, at least 20% of the total units is no longer good enough. Of course, it pencils out. We know it works for those who finance traditional development, but I would, there are opportunities to question whether those standards and norms are what need to continue to be perpetuated. So I'm incredibly impressed with the idea of the weighted average of all the affordable units not exceeding 70% AMI. I think that's an incredibly kind of generous frame of collectivity and understanding what that balance should, perhaps add up to. But 20% of total units, I would say, is not enough. And I'm not sure you're here to share this information with us today. Are you asking for anything in particular? Maybe that's not my place to ask. I defer to the chair on that. So
and the answer to that, Jessica, is they're seeking a letter of support, and as with any action item, we will take 30 to 60 days to review the request. This was presented because it's a land use item. There is a plan there, and we can have conversations as the month progresses to take a position next month. John, but that was just as far as our process.
Yes.
and then just sorry, a third point of question on the executive budget summary. Point 3 in the header as a statement doesn't actually make sense. It reads, creating a new tax incentive to encourage the inclusion of affordable homes in market rate units. So I don't know what that means. It doesn't seem to make sense. So I don't necessarily need clarification. I've read what was provided, and I question whether it is static, if we were to say support it, or if it is an evolving set of policy decisions. As an idea, I absolutely think it's fantastic, but as you're asking for a board for a point of support in concept, sure, the specifics. So how static are your specifics is my question.
Yeah, so the summary that we provided was the governor's initial offer. And in fact, we looked back at the language, and the governor's language includes that the affordable units would be permanently affordable, even when the incentive expires, because that was a point of concern for us as well. In terms of the percentage, there was a city council hearing on this matter. The city council has a resolution calling for the state to take action on this. And we support what the city council members have said, saying that the affordability requirement should be higher than 20%. What that ultimate number will be negotiated by the legislature, but we're all on board with the higher percentage. And the third point was about point 3. We understand that real estate south of 96th Street is very lucrative. And the office conversions happening now are purely market rate because there is no incentive for affordable units. So we're advocating for a tax incentive that they would only receive if they provide affordable units. Understanding that most of the building will be market rate just because it's lucrative real estate south of 96th Street. And unfortunately, rentals are overtaxed and condos are undertaxed. And if there is no tax incentive for affordability, they'll continue to do more office conversions that yield condos.
Thank you for the clarification. And Jason, I look forward to how you're going to field our process here. And I think there will be further discussion about where the board opines and for what purpose with regard to evolving legislative action. Thank you.
And I will add that we have received some letters of support from boards that have said that they wanted, for example, a deeper level of affordability and other stipulations. And we welcome that because ultimately the legislature will decide. We want to have as many voices as possible from across the city.
Thank you, John. I would only ask, as when you send the presentation, if you could send some of those letter of supports from the other community boards specifically.
Oh, definitely.
I think it assists with, understanding the point of this presentation. So, before George, Candy, and then George.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for that presentation. It was very interesting. As the organization that I work for, we're a community-based organization dealing with housing and socioeconomic needs. And as a housing ambassador, I understand the whole housing that needs to be addressed and how we have a shortage. And now with this whole changes of how the whole immigration now is also involved with this, they're trying to house them as well. It's just like we're so oversaturated and there's not enough. I would like to know how many community-based organizations in East Harlem, since you say 5 boroughs, I didn't get to see anyone that you have in Manhattan in your group that you've included.
Yes,
So
the full list is on our website. But we have some groups such as Street Corner Resources, the NAACP Manhattan chapter, Mothers on the Move, a few other groups. In East Harlem, I don't know, I'd have to look through the list to see if there's specific East Harlem groups, but we welcome more groups. It's a growing list. We started in January and we haven't spoken to everyone, but we welcome more groups and introductions.
Yeah, because East Harlem has a lot of community-based organizations that are also housing providers, and they do advocate as well, such as our organizations. But you have the Acacias, you have other groups as well, that advocate for housing. And so, I'm not trying to get NILSA. I won't put you guys all in it, but I'm just saying that there's other groups as well that we deal with people that are impacted by the lack of housing, and it's something that, we work in forces together, which I was discussing today, that, everyone should just come out there and start. I'm not going to say, I'll just leave that for another day, but we just need to be more vocal and fight for more spaces where that is already existing for affordable housing. And fight for the more deeper level of affordability, not just for the higher incomes and luxury housing. So I will look forward to hearing more about this organization and where it's going and the legislation and support, because housing is a right for everyone and it's of all deep of levels, so, but I just would like to see more of that. If you're saying 5 boroughs, that Manhattan, especially if you're coming here to us, that you're including East Harlem as well, for those that are interested,
And I included my email. I welcome introductions to additional groups. This is a growing effort. I'm only one person and one staff member, but welcome more groups.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your efforts.
Thank you, John. And Candy. I'm sorry, George. Beverly, then George.
Thank you. My question is quick. In regards to if these things go forward, how have you had any discussion on how these available apartments will be marketed? Would they be going through Housing Connect, or would they be marketed through the developers, separately?
Yes.
Because I know it's very hard now, even now with the housing that we do have, to find get through the application process to qualify for these apartments. Thank you.
Yes, yes. So it's important to know that if the state lifts these restrictions, the city will still need to take action. So that would include listing them on Housing Connect. The affordable units would be on Housing Connect. And the city would have to make some steps about, okay, we're talking about conversions, making sure that they're a suitable size, making sure that they have the light requirements, because office buildings tend to be dark. So the city definitely has to take some action after the state makes its action. But short answer, yes, it would be on Housing Connect like any other affordable housing lotteries.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jason, you're on mute.
I said George, and then we're gonna close because then after we have to take this land use action tonight.
Okay, so I just to be very brief on this is that there's a lot of issues with what John presented, but one of the things I just want to make clear to this committee is that the 12 FAR cap in state law and eliminating that would be a big deal. I mean, it's come up many times over the past several years, and there are two different ways of doing it. In 1997, we amended the MDL to allow for conversions to exceed the 12 FAR cap. And so if you wanted to support additional conversions, newer buildings, it could be amended in the carve out for conversions. It could also, the one sentence that says residential buildings are limited to 12 FAR in state law could be deleted. I think that's what John was proposing. That is a big deal. And if you're looking to, because that would apply to everything, that would apply to conversions, it would apply to new buildings, it would allow for, a R11 or R12 district that the city would invent in the future. So there are different ways of supporting. If you wanted to support conversions, one would be in a kind of limited fashion that would be looking at the conversion specifically, and what would apply everywhere. And they are different magnitudes of decisions that I just want to make certain are clear to this board committee. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Thank you, John. John, do you have a response to that, or are you good?
Well, no, George is absolutely right. It's two separate things. And we think the city should determine where it makes sense to have a higher FAR rather than it being decided by Albany. We understand some neighborhoods will never have buildings that exceed 12 FAR. They don't have the infrastructure to support it. But there are other neighborhoods. I just came from Manhattan Community Board 4, where they said, hey, we have Hudson Yards. We should have a higher 12 FAR there. So there's interest from neighborhoods in the city, but it's all moot because of the state law.
Thank you for your presentation. I think this is a good conversation for us to continue. As stated, we'll review your request for a letter of support. I think to take heed to some of the information that was presented both to yourself, to our committee members, and our committee members to you, in the sense of, if you could get us in a space of understanding some of the things that we're concerned about, particularly we're working with our local CBOs. It makes it a lot more beneficial for us to work towards that common goal, because one of our primary objectives in our district with our statement is housing. Unfortunately, as Georgia expressed, sometimes we get, because we're a disadvantaged district, we tend to, and I guess I don't want to use too many political terms, but the concept of, you know, the wolf in sheep clothing, and we don't want to think that we're looking at something in one way that might assist a particular group of people, but then affects another group that we, that tends to be the people we serve in our district, which seems to be your concern with the Bronx, which I'm familiar with that county. So thank you for your presentation. I would now close and we will continue on with the agenda.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you, John. Great. So we're done with the presentations and discussions. Now we'll move on to old business and we will vote on a recommendation for land use application relevant to the new development at 180 East 125th Street. Is the presenter here?
The applicant's representative is present. If in case we have questions, it's, I'm sorry, I mean, I always mispronounce your name and I don't want to butcher it, but she is here.
Makes two of us.
Representing Kramer 11.
I appreciate it.
Meenakshi, and I can't do the last name.
Yes, hi.
Sorry.
I know that I was going to be presenting because I presented last month. I thought this was just a discussion for the board members or the committee members. But I'm here to answer any questions.
Yeah, it's just the questions relevant that we asked for last month, that there was going to be some follow-up and you were going to go back to the developer. We just wanted to see if there was any late information. Again, we know many of the questions that were concerning are relevant to the as of right portion of the project. But that being said, were you able to obtain any information relevant to the concerns that were brought forth by the committee?
Well, I think that, you know, some of the questions about affordable housing, as we noted last month, was that we would work with HPD and follow whatever requirements they would have from us. That's really our response to that. I'm not sure there's much more to add. You know, this project is essentially as of right, and I just want to reiterate that what's before your board is really not even, so the fresh food store is really the application. And that fresh food store is a certification. It's essentially as of right. We're asking for a 6,000 square foot fresh food store. It's at a location that we believe is very well suited for such a use, given that it's on 125th Street and has access from along the main commercial spine of East Harlem. It's adjacent to an existing subway stop, as well as a future subway hub for the 2nd Avenue subways. So it'll provide, it's at a location which has plenty of access, both walking distance from residential residents in the area, as well as people who are coming by transit. And the neighborhood is growing and will have additional units coming online. The application is a certification by the City Planning Commission, and the authorization is really for just the height waiver to accommodate the additional square footage, 6,000 square feet. And I think we had shown you previously that the building form actually fits in quite well, because the area has a mix of heights in the neighborhood, but it also has significantly taller buildings in the immediate area. So with that, I'm happy to hear your comments, and of course we would like your support for what we think is actually a very modest application that's before your board.
Thank you. As stated, yes, the intention this evening is to take a position of whether or not to approve and or disapprove, well, not and or disapprove the project. That again, in either process, still allows us to add conditions. I have seen nothing submitted formally from the committee and or constituents concerning relevant to the fresh application to date in writing. But that being said, I now turn it over to the members if they have any further questions prior to us taking a position. Jessica Elliott.
I'm ready to make a motion if there are no questions.
Prior to that, Jessica Morris.
Thank you. I have a question about conditionality, and Jason, I think this is more of a committee question than for the applicant. If we are to, this is really the only opportunity to have a voice in what is an as of right action. I think what one of the questions that I brought up at the presentation last month that I think we didn't follow up, and so there wasn't necessarily a conversation beyond the legal team with the development team, is the affordability mix. And it's understood that that will be determined independently of any land use application through 421A certification intended, even though the expiration has happened because they started the process before it expired. That's understood. With regard to possibly being interested in suggesting a condition, I just want to confirm that this would be 30% affordable. It's something that I had a question. I just want to, that's a point of confirmation in whereas number 3, 30% affordable is what's being planned and then executed. And my point of question, having an issue of the scale of retail not related to the fresh food store, and this is it's as of right, and so it's a separate conversation. Perhaps if there's interest in following up, but a big box or enormous retail as opposed to smaller scale retail has a very different vibe on the street. So that's a point of concern. More so, and Candy, this is building on your hard work of advocating for Ella, extremely low and very low income affordability bands. And that is everything 50% of AMI and lower. There's a tranche of affordability between 51% and 80%. That's quote low income, and moderate income that's between 81% and 120% of AMI. Having done some research with regard to redevelopment on the Brooklyn waterfront, a typical split in affordability units shows up as some number at 80% AMI and then some number at 120% AMI, which is different than the 80-20 split that may be kind of confusing. But 80-120 is something that's very common, and that puts it puts it at the very high of low and moderate. And so I'm suggesting that this is perhaps an opportunity for the community board to exercise its voice, whether it will be listened to or not, whether it will be taken to HPD or not. This is the opportunity we have on the record to exercise our voice, suggesting that we perhaps make a statement to advocate for some of those more what would be considered a sort of workforce level housing, 60% AMI, 70% AMI, and in that range. While of course that is under 80% because of the bands, you often don't get that middle, such as in 1 East Harlem, you have 40% as very low, 50% as very low, and then it jumps to 100% as moderate and 165% as moderate. So is this development perhaps a great opportunity to have some units representing that low income, not moderate income, not very low income, but low income, classified as low income, and that is 70% AMI, a 2-bedroom is $2,100. That's not cheap, right? But it's considered in that bracket. So I don't know if this is our place to do that. If it's worth making a statement or getting more information about what may be missing in what's been built in our district and what may be built, so that we can suggest when there is an opportunity like this, which is, there's some play in a building of this size of how to make everything pencil out. And so, if we have an ask, this would be the place to make that ask in a condition. Thank you.
Andy.
Hi, thanks. So, yeah, listening to my colleague, Jessica, thank you. On the draft, on line number 4, where it says that is proposing the development plan, is not defining the affordable and the distribution of units that, in order to support such a big project like this, everybody's throwing around affordable, and we just need to make sure that we know exactly what kind of affordability, because anybody could afford who can afford from their own budget. But we have a really serious housing crisis here going on. And, obviously the ones we see that are out there in the streets are the ones that cannot afford to live anywhere. We need to have a little bit of consideration. I understand that Excel wants to put luxury in whatever it is that they want to make sure mortgage has to be paid and all that kind of stuff. I understand the whole dynamic of the development piece, but right now also we have a housing crisis. The other thing is that, the AMI, just to have in consideration that it should be accorded with the average of the East Harlem income level. So that's my opinion before we get into the voting, and for the record, my opinion.
Thank you, Candy. Thank you, Jessica. Any other questions? Beverly Pabon?
Yeah,
Comments?
yes, thank you, Chair. I do have a lot of concerns also regarding the AMI bandwidth that they're proposing. In line 3, it says that they would use 30% of affordable programs under such program as the 421A. Is this 421A the program you will be using? Because I'm understanding that the 421A is no longer available. And if it's not, what other programs would be available that you would use for affordable housing?
So the 421A program, at least what I understand, is there is a start date, which was, I guess, last year in 2022. And then there's a period in which you can vest, and that's up till 2026. So the project is intended to be completed by then, and therefore will be eligible for the 421A program. So new projects that didn't get a certain amount of foundations in the ground by last year in 2022 are not vested, but our project is vested, and now we have to complete it by 2026.
Okay, so.
And of course, we intend to do that.
Right, because I was just reading some things where I asked a question in Google, searching whether the 421A program has expired, and they saying yes as of January 2023. Let me see. And it also said it expired without renewing the program, although developers can no longer take advantage of the 421A tax abatement program. For new projects, they can use it for projects that began before December 22nd of 2022. And
Right, so
that-
we
do
did
you-
start the project, and so that's how we make that, we can tick that box. And then the other requirement is to complete the project in by 2026. So if there's a project that didn't vest in the first, meaning starting the project before, I think it was June 15, 2022, then those projects are not eligible for 421A, but our project is.
June, you said June of 2022?
I believe it's June 15th of 2022.
Right, because I'm also looking at your zoning application. And I had questions regarding that because it said the land use filed in September 21 of 2022.
Right, but we've done some foundation work because again, this project is, the retail space or the fresh food store is really the piece that has to go through, needs to be certified by the chair of the City Planning Commission. And the authorization is for the height. So we were able to put some foundations in the ground because otherwise it's an as-of-right building and the footprint of the building is not going to change.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you all for your
Oh,
questions and
fine.
comments. No, I think
Okay.
it was really clear. Jessica Elliott,
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully I've incorporated those thoughts as we can realistically, with the understanding that this is an application specifically for the fresh grocery store. But my motion is motion to support application 230071 and 230072 with the following conditions. One, that the applicant share the letter of intent that they have with Brooklyn Fair with Manhattan Community Board 11. Two, that the applicant ensure that the future operator commits to the consistent availability of fresh foods at an affordable price given the context of East Harlem. Three, that the applicant advise Manhattan Community Board 11 of any developments with the site impacted by the future work of the MTA. Four, that the applicant revisit this committee with updates for the as-of-right project no later than June 2023 with updated affordability and AMI metrics, with the understanding that affordable housing, especially at the deepest levels, is the #1 concern for Manhattan Community Board 11.
Can I just add that the letter of intent was a part of the application from Brooklyn Fair, so it should be in your package.
Okay, I was unable to access it and I was pulling it up off the website, so maybe I can check the email version, but I was not able to view it.
any other comment? So hearing the motion on the floor to approve the application with the conditions that was spoken about by Jessica Elliott, do we have a second?
Nilsa's hand is raised.
I'm sorry, Nosa.
Yes, Chair Villanueva, I second the motion made by Jessica Elliott with its all attendant conditions.
Angel, if you could, we'll take a call vote.
Certainly. Committee members, when I call your name, please respond with your vote. Devin Cronshaw,
Yes.
Kenneth Crouch,
Yes.
Jessica Elliott,
Yes.
Jessica Morris,
Yes.
Nelsa Orama,
Yes.
Beverly Pabon,
Yes.
Vinnie Torres,
Yes.
Jason Villanueva,
Yes.
and Candy Vasquez.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
We will now move on with the agenda. Oh, sorry, I had old business. Points of agreement has been moved to the executive committee. As I stated last month, our intern at the office, just pretty much put a great package together. I do recommend it. We were gonna have that discussion tonight, but as you can see, we're already on to 2 hours. And those of you that know, I try to warrant your, Angel. You clearing me up?
Oh, no.
Oh.
Well, yes, but I wasn't let you finish.
Yeah. Oh, God, clear me up.
So, yeah, so, as Jason was referencing, our intern Abigail Lee has been doing a great job, preparing the, POA, spreadsheet for us. And she was gonna come and present to the executive committee, as it was being rescheduled from this meeting. Unfortunately, she's not gonna be available for that meeting, so we're moving it to the April executive committee meeting.
Excellent. Thank you, Angel. In the meantime,
welcome.
I'll share the work that she provided to the executive, to our committee, just so if there's any comments, please reach out to me and I'll show your voices is heard at that table. Rolling action item list, AKA project tracker. It's 100% geared for the committee, and it's probably more important for your future chair, right? Just as some of you may or may not know, I became chair because our previous chair left and the chair before that left. So a lot of things get lost in translation. The board office is phenomenal. They're great. As you can always see the stuff on the website, as many of you tend to constantly remind me, as well as some of the other services, and our DM is graciously always available. But out of respect for his time and the staff's time, it's also for us to coordinate and collaborate with each other, which is the intention behind this list. It's not necessarily a list for us to, how you could say, it is a list so we can ensure that we're tracking the item, like example given, we did this letter of support. I'm sorry, not the letter, we approved this land use application that was submitted to us, you know, and we're making requests, we're making conditions, and June will come and some of us will be here and others won't for a variety of reasons. So we want to ensure that that type of information is at the forefront for our committee members that are current and more importantly towards the future. So that's the intention behind the list, as well as it is to coordinate some of the items that happened honestly before I even thought of becoming a board member that we are not following up on, that projects are going up all around us. And you know, it'll provide that continuity that I myself am not seem to have, and being an active and engaging participant to the board. So that again takes nothing away from what has been done, what is already being done, and more importantly, this is a part of our goals that we agreed to of what we need to do. So committee members have reached out to me and was concerned about some actions, and I think that is one of the actions that will really assist us in having some future foresight and being more practical, like in understanding what we're reviewing, what's a priority for us based off the bylaws. I'm sorry, not the bylaws, the city charter that is codified by our bylaws, but even furthermore, some of the initiatives that is like what was being brought forth to you today from not a local, but a CBO, that we should be engaging with each other as well as with the other CBOs within the district and our constituents. So again, as expressed earlier, we're going to try to do this with this red line event. I really, really want to thank Jessica Morris and Beverly Pabon for their efforts on that, because I think that's going to be one step towards many that is going to bring us, you know, look at it as networking, right? We'll build together and it'll make us better understand what is being done that we may not see that's happening behind the scenes, but more importantly, what needs to be done, right? Which like today, HPD was present, knocked off. Hopefully, definitively, right? As your chair, we will ensure that they come back, right? And we have that conversation to slot out time for concerns that are district-wide. But again, for me, I'm a project manager, so I tend to track things in these ways. So I love task lists, and I think it would be beneficial for me as chair for you, and more importantly for you as committee members to collaborate with each other. You do not need me to call a fellow board member. We're volunteers, we signed up for this. So I will always advise for us to contact one another. And for those of you that don't, my number 646-342-5026. You can contact me and I promise I'll respond. Beverly Pabon.
Yes, Chair, thank you. In regards to the project tracker, would they have a column for all the dates of the presentations that we have like on the YouTube channel, so we can go back to that specific one in order to refresh our minds on what was happening? Because I did that a little bit for tonight's meeting, but trying to go through it and try to find out what date they were was kind of difficult. So I had to like scroll through all of these videos and try to figure out what day these presentations was done. And in regards to the preview up that we did for 244 East 106th Street, you was saying something about a field trip. Can you, I would love to be a part of doing that field trip.
Oh, let me explain now off the back. There's nothing I say here that's for me. It's for us. Anything I advise or request for and maybe I'm not clear on that, apologies, because if I get familiar, and comfortability breeds complacency, but anything I request for as chair is not for me as an individual, it will always be for the committee. So my effort is to, I was interested. I've never seen what I believe to be a dorm-like adult space. That's my opinion, but that being said, I don't want to vote on that land use action or application based off my opinion. I want to do the research and the study, and I implore all of you to attend. We'll set it up with Chris, the same thing. And if you guys, anybody want to volunteer to assist in that effort, we're working with me and the staff with Chris to set that up. You guys are always more than welcome to jump in. As you can imagine, it's a lot easier to delegate a task when you offer to help than it is for me to request for you to perform a task and we can't get it done. So that's another purpose of this rail tracker. And I don't want to belabor it because you guys have been here so late, and I really, really appreciate the time that you've been sharing with me. So if you don't mind, Jessica Morris.
Yeah, I've got an item for new business just to mention.
Excellent.
Point of inquiry.
We'll get there. Right
We're not
before.
there yet. Okay, I didn't want
yet.
you to close out prematurely.
No, I won't. We follow the agenda to the T. So, and the last old business item is the December meeting minutes. I want to apologize on the record. I did intend on getting those up to date this month. Unfortunately, my family was stricken with COVID. Personal issue, life happens. It will roll on. Needless to say, you'll have the minutes for December and March at our April meeting. So that takes care of any old business that's relevant, unless any other committee members have old business. That being said, we'll move on with the agenda to new business. I have none. Jessica Morris.
So I do have just it's a bit of an inquiry for the committee, and I think it classifies under new business, and I might fall into the camp of it's totally absurd, but you don't know until you ask and until you kind of raise the question. And I brought it up at executive just as a first point of inquiry, testing the waters and what feels like a safe space. I'm aware of some effort with Community Board 5 and the redevelopment of the Penn Station district. You may or may not be aware, but Madison Square Garden is in the way, apparently, of what could be a 21st century first-class transit hub. At the same time, Madison Square Garden's zoning doesn't allow for it to do what it does where it does what it does. And that special permit expires with City Council approval in June. So City Council will have to renew it. They don't pay any taxes to do what they do. So why am I talking about this here in Community Board 11? Well, because with the awareness that there is significant real estate interests around the area of 125th and Park Avenue. I did a little bit of head scratching to see what a footprint of an arena might be and whether that might be able to land like it came from the moon in our little neighborhood. Should that be a use that we may have interest in suggesting to our council member that we would like to, explore the potential for. So what I'm suggesting to the land use committee is, are there any objections to inquiring with a professional who may have the use of a staff to be able to do some small feasibility study about whether that would, as a footprint, even be possible? The reason why it could potentially be an economic benefit, if that is a use that East Harlem would welcome, if it pairs well with the type of use that was planned for what was NEC further down the corridor, and the integration of a real transit hub. Uptown Grand Central is, you all know, a CBO we have here, but it's a concept of a quality of place in the heart of our neighborhood. So testing the waters, asking whether there are objections, concerns to thinking through that potential feasibility. Maybe George has some concerns. It's pretty far out, no doubt, and I don't even know if it's something to consider, but I thought that it made sense to bring it here first, as opposed to, asking any, particular professional with a sort of bit of a passion for the city of New York generally to look into it and see, what they think, and then perhaps bring it back here to this committee to consider in April, if there is a sense that it's not totally infeasible, such that we may suggest, to take a position or to send our council member a letter before city council makes their vote in June. So that's the new business. Am I serious? I don't know. Am I bringing it to the table? I am, because it's a head scratcher, and it's I think Barclays Center at 125th and Park.
Understood, Jessica. Elliot, before we cut, Morris, as you would know, tend to be liberal in my thinking and a conservative in my stature. That being said, I hear an opportunity, but just as the young man earlier that brought up the opportunity, it's just about having the conversation. So if you have information, I think that's the first step. You did bring it up at executive, and I it's a big picture idea, but so was many of the things that formed our systems that I played today. So I would like to ask if you could provide more information, and that's me. Any other committee members have any comments? And then when I say provide, because I'm more than certain that there's been some research done on this, or there's some articles, and if you could point me in the right direction, it tends to help me out. Before we go, Beverly, then Candy. Hold on 5 minutes, please.
Yes, I'll make this quick. Hey, Madison Square Garden in East Harlem. Yeah, okay. That's something to really think about. But also, because Jessica brought this up, trying to look at forward on properties and things to use for the community. The church that's going to be closing down in 118th Street this year. I know I've been speaking to Xavier and asking him that we start thinking about what type of use that property can be used for when it comes up. For what I understand, that the Archdiocese is thinking about selling that building. It's a school now. So I just want to bring that to land use attention for us to keep an eye on that also.
Thank you, Beverly. And I promise, every place I have the word rail and POA right next to it, I have Beverly Pabon, because I know you're gonna help me with the Google spreadsheet as committed back in December.
Yes.
So you will be a part of the process so hopefully we could provide this deliverable to the committee sooner than later. So
Thank
that's
you.
Beverly. Anybody else? Before we jump top, I just want to, I like I said, I like the Madison Square. I like any conversation of an idea. I think it's something to be had. So Jessica, we'll continue to have conversations throughout the month. As you know, I tend to get to create the agenda so we can continue that. And I'll have other discussions with committee members. And again, cross collaborate, please communicate. We don't need to just do this once a month. Candy.
Very quick, because I understand I'm tired too, but that conversation was set many years ago when when it first became vacant. So you're just revisiting, it will be revisiting a conversation and bringing it back out from, let's say, the dust out of the closet. And we're talking about like at least more than, I don't know, when this is when Bill Perkins was a city council with like 2015, 2016. So that's been discussed. And then nothing's come out of that place. Nothing since. You know, too many people have come in and out. Many developers came in, bailed out. You know, I don't know if Vinny will remember that, or it was before Vinny came on board, and whoever else was here on the committee. But this conversation has been had. Just wanted to put it out there. We just got to look in our archives.
Candy, I'd love to download on what that conversation was, if there was a general consensus or perspective.
There was, I don't think, it was all tape recorded, so you have to go through the tape.
Okay,
There
thanks.
definitely was no general. I remember that conversation. A lot of uproar. But well, again, you know, the only way things get fixed is if we decide to fix it. So it's up to us. And that's, again, some of the intentions with some, even the presentations. We could wait for legislators all day to present their ideas and their great big picture concepts, or we could do the work, which is some of the things that many of you have been pushing, right? A lot of the ideas that we're bringing to the table in this committee. So
Even
I don't
put a
know.
lot for 27. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not still on. I'm so sorry.
You're on, yeah, you're a speaker.
Oh.
If anybody else doesn't have any comments, we'll move along and I will adjourn the meeting before we lose quorum.
Good night.
8:47 p.m. Angel. Thank you, everyone. And again, use the phone number.
Good night, everyone.